Let's attempt to impart some, how should one call it, novel consciousness. Um, it almost sounds like we were in the 60s, but if we could excuse that. So I've been thinking about this project of Vance. So I think it's actually, there's a struggle in the Democratic race. So it's like I put it that way because like I think the Democrats are basically a race. I mean, you could make a juxtaposition: genus, race. You could look at how Tacitus uses the word genus to me, and then it's the classical scholars of the 19th century, when classical philology was a very serious matter, attempting to propound the basic truth from which our legal order would be um, sort of then conveyed to us. Um, so, like Nietzsche says, like the classical scholars pride themselves as being the first among the Prussians. But today they're regarded as, to use the phrase of Burckhardt, as a sort of poor relatives who are seeking just merely to sit at the table of their rich relatives who don't want to see them go under just for the sake of some kind of old money ethos. Because the thing is, like it would somehow reflect bad upon them as the old Rockefeller house or whatever. Whoever the leading families that we never heard of were before the time of the Knickerbockers, before the time of the going back into the origins of the founders, so they can the Calvinist origins to some extent. We have a situation where it seems to me, so like, so one, I'm just like sort of developing the introduction to questioning, which is it's just following Heidegger. So it's just following Heidegger as Dugin follows Heidegger. So it's like the East and the I'm debating whether to go into a parenthetical. Okay, we could go into a parenthetical reflection just a little bit. Is that I think Dugin is the only one that could repair the split between the Giertych, the Polish papal theologian. Yeah, there's an American pope, but who remains in power while the American pope is in the South American pope switch seats? It's Giertych, the papal theologian, the serious guy. So there could be a discussion between this Polish guy, Giertych, I think it's like there's a weird reputation of Poles. Like, remember, but this remember in he wrote a lot of good stuff. The guy who wrote Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and I think it was he was a gay guy. He was interviewed a number of times. You can see it on YouTube. Who wrote parts deliberately for the object of his sort of like who he was down hard for. It was Marlon Brando. This is sort of disgusting, but okay. Tennessee Williams. So they wrote this play called this play with sort of sickening when you think of the details. I mean, morally sickening also. I'm not just talking about the homosexual aspect, but also this use of Vivian Lee, because Vivian Lee was like a sort of schizophrenic. She was like she was married to Laurence Olivier, who said like basically thought she was all like fucked up. And she was deliberately cast as this hysterical rape victim of Marlon Brando in the fantasy of Tennessee Williams, who deliberately cast it that way. I mean, he didn't make the film. The guy who made on Eli Wallach, I think, made the film. Is that right? Maybe that's not right. I'm thinking. No, I'm just making an artificial connection between the fact that Marlon Brando was in both On the Waterfront and in Streetcar Named Desire. But in any case, he didn't. Tennessee Williams wasn't the director of the film version, but nonetheless, that's who he had seen when he wrote the play. I think Brando maybe played the part on the stage also first. But let's get back to the original situation here. So we have a situation where you want, in a way, the philosopher to only say the things that are known. So, like, there's a discussion right now on the question of if you have some kind of geometrical interpretation of Einstein, of the general theory of relativity, what can you derive from that? And what can you derive if you don't have that geometrical interpretation? And there's all kinds of things like that. And then you want the person who knows, the scientist or the philosopher, to say, like, objectively what's the truth about these doctrines. But then it always turns out these doctrines are always true within some limits, and then you have to say, right now we have to act. And it's like, then you also want the statesman, you also want Vance. So Vance isn't necessarily a philosopher in the sense that Zizek is a philosopher. So Zizek just got in the news for having this session with the Soros, the younger. I've sat beside him in the East Asian, the new building, East Asian Library at UC Berkeley. He's a nice man. But we can't go only by a fake version of philosophy, which is science, which is that there's some closed, perfect systems, and that they have an answer to them, and that this is can be given as a hypothesis or as a theorem, and then we could say if it's true or not by experiment. So, but the statesman, politicos, is more serious than that. So, it's like, in a way, fascism has to do with this. But let me make it sort of little aside on the necessary aside, which is like in antiquity. So, like in antiquity, you had this rise of the notion of politics, and that politics is ultimately to be. It took like 100 years, 200 years. Pisistratus and the Pisistrati, who had some kind of foreign bodyguard similar to a Praetorian Guard, but not exactly. And the reason they had a foreign bodyguard is because originally a tyrant meant somebody you hated, and hate meant that you wanted to kill them. Now, at the same time, it was said by the supporters of the Pisistrati that what tyrant meant was that the traditional powers had been overthrown, that something better had come in, and now we're going to give you the written version of Iliad, because we, the Pisistrati, are going to have the scribes come and write it down, and you can take the scroll to your own house and read it, and there's been improvement. So tyrant originally had like a double meaning. Which one came a little bit behead? The other is not clear. But out of these tyrannies, and then 100 years or so later, then you got the tyrant instantiating the democracy, and then all kinds of things happened alongside that. This is because you had to move from Draco to Saloon, and you had the institution of the something like what was later called mens rea coming into all discussion of the legal order. So we have a very specific situation that has to do with the West, right? That's the Abendlandish situation as against the Hindu situation, as against the sinological situation, meaning the Chinese situation, as against the African situations, and so on. The African situations are very interesting, actually, because you have something very valuable, which is that where there are congealed forms, crystallized forms, in the sinological or Chinese situation, and in the Abendlandish, or in the Germanish, or because sometimes they call it before the war they used to call it the Indo-Germanic root languages. After the war they favored the Indo-European root languages version. So the Germans were predominant in education in every way. Every way, so far as the West is concerned. That's I would say that's simply true. You have some things that were happening in Oxbridge. You have some things that are happening in Scotland. Kristen Stewart is Scottish, of course, by her deep ethnicity. But which I am not. I have some Welsh background, some small amount of Welsh background. I have more Polish, or put more accurately, Galatian from Brody background. But so we'll see here a situation where there's a possibility that we could sort of decide against our racial inclination. So like there's a racial inclination of the Democrats, as I was saying, there's racial inclination of the conservatives or Republicans. But we could decide against our racial, we could decide to reflect and then not be absorbed in our racial, or in a way. So it's like Alex Jones is presenting this as tribal inclination, which is not wrong. But in a way, so like what I was trying to say, in a way, when there's a tribal inclination, there's a sort of there's a more openness to the what Heidegger is calling after Meister Eckhart, this Gelassenheit, art this something which isn't yet laden with this all this plaque of conceptual this is true within certain limitations type of thinking, which sort of absorbs us in our sort of deployment of what we could call agenda, or that the whole concern of human beings lends itself towards certain already laid out things to be done, and then it's like these are considered practical. But I think within this bound, even the race of the Democrats sees at least a sort of Roman advantage, a kind of the kind of advantage that was traditionally understood as in connection with the Roman way of doing things, an expedient, a mere expedient. Wouldn't it be better, because Trump is so demented, to have Vance? So even I think some proportion of the Democrats, but there's an attempt by sort of the centrist Democrats to utterly obliterate these people. Robert Reich, I think, is more sort of, he's so enraged. He sort of almost wants to obliterate these people that say we could have Vance. So like it's like he hates Trump, And if you were to be expedient, you'd say, all right, let Trump retire in honor, let him have assurances he won't be, not only that he, let him have assurances not only that he won't be prosecuted, but also that he will be honored, also that he'll have a place of honor. Build him a statue on the Capitol, spelled with an O. And it will not be taken, it will not be removed. I mean, make some offer, okay? If you took it up like that, then you'd say, yeah, no, Robert Reich won't accept that because it's too, he has a cosmic rage. He has a cosmic rage like Achilles almost. He wants to exterminate not only in some kind of, just utterly obliterate his enemy, the conservatives or Republicans. But I think a lot of the Democrats are willing to say, it's like, oh, we could let, if anything we could do to make a bargain to get Vance in, that might not be so bad. So then on the other hand, I'm saying also, in addition to that, Vance is more like Malcolm X, who said, like, I have to say, like, Elijah Muhammad said this, Elijah Muhammad said that, but I don't say I, Malcolm X, say this. And only when I left the Nation of Islam did I start to say that. I just stopped because I'm thinking sort of like, about the successor of Elijah Muhammad, who's still alive. Who in fact backed Trump to some extent at the beginning. So actually I would have to do a research on that. I don't know if he continues to back Trump with the Iran war. It's an interesting question. It's sort of a black separatist directed question. I don't know. I would hope that I would hope and pray that that it could be possible for the nation, even the Nation of Islam, to back Vance. I think what Vance would do. So first of all, I think what Vance would do would be he would target the so-called E class or the Epstein class, and yeah, this is true in a certain crude way. This is put down as Marxism or socialism, but actually it's nothing of the kind. It's just simply he would target trillionaires or billionaires who are political and who are taking too much power from the common good and directing it towards their own sort of Imelda Marcos pursuits. Like if you think of on a metaphor, like if Imelda Marcos had a whole factory doing nothing but making shoes for herself, and then she kept telling you, oh, well, I'm providing jobs to these people, but it's like these shoes are being made for no reason except that you like it. So this type of person Vance would clip, but not in general, not as the regular entrepreneurs, but just for a few trillionaires and a few mega concerns, which would become WAQFs, WAQF, WAQF, the Muslim form which existed prior to Napoleon ousting it from Egypt. Which is sort of like a religious or very scrupulous people run the corporation, and they do it on behalf of what's ever most rational or sensible for the whole, rather than what's ever most profit-driven or Imelda Marcos-like. Yeah, so I think Vance could do that easily, and he would deploy the military not against Persia, but against his people that would resist that through private security forces like BlackRock. As you said, these private security forces that are military grade would resist the U.S. military. They would be totally suppressed, um, and just made it. They would just be made illegal. Let's put it that way. If they resisted, then of course there would be a fight, but they would lose because they're not at the scale of the U.S. military. So they would probably make a deal and stand down. So also in context of this, I'm sort of the introduction to questioning is partially noticing that the situation with philosophic how much we are informed thinkers in a philosophic way. So it's like again like imparting novel consciousness. Yeah, this would it plays a role because you have to stay abreast of everything in the fullest way. We don't want to just be so it's like for instance I'd say something just like briefly. I think it's like some people criticize me because they're saying you're giving Jang, Jang, so-called Professor Jang has made this pronouncements and stuff. Oh, you're giving Jang so much credit, blah blah blah. But the thing is, within certain limits, like thinking of geopolitical predictions, Jang has proved himself pretty good. That's legitimate. It's so. But then you could say, but yeah, but Jang is no philosopher. He's no. There's no comparison between Jang and Dugan. There's kind of a comparison between Jang and Nick Land. Okay, I just think Nick Land, so far as I know, because I haven't really studied him, but my impression is, yeah, he's not very good. But if he's not very good, he's not very good at philosophy. Maybe he's like a 1600 or 2000 or like mid-range chess player at philosophy, like 2000, like expert or something. I'm only an expert myself at chess. I feel like Nick Land is like an expert at philosophy, whereas, yeah, Dugan is a grandmaster and so on. But, yeah, if you talk about Jang, yeah, Jang isn't even trying to be a philosopher. That's not what he's trying to do. So, but within certain limits, he's kind of good at what he does. So that's my point on Jang. To my detractors on that point. And then I think it's interesting that Jang has pointed out that it's too hot to have a ground invasion. So Alex Jones is really fetched on pushing this notion that he saw in Austin a bunch of military personnel getting on the plane to go to the Middle East. Maybe, I don't know. I really don't know, but it's think that. And I had a discussion on X with somebody presenting themselves as though they were former military, saying, "Yeah, we've fought in hotter in desert temperatures. Like it's all, where it's always sunny. You go to desert, so it's there's they're saying yeah, the U.S. has gone to war in the Middle East in the summer before." But then it's sort of I'm thinking maybe Jang realizes that, and he's well, maybe it was learned that that's kind of a mistake. Maybe Trump knows that, so he's sort of caught between a rock and a hard place, to use the Odyssean phrase without using it. Silly on Charybdis. But, this he's caught between that there's the midterms and he's got to deal with certain things, and that it's too hot to invade. It's really not, even though there may be certain special forces can do that. Okay, there's certain the American special forces can deal with the heat, fine, but not all the regular army guys can deal with it. It probably wouldn't be beneficial because, after all, for 30 centuries, the Iranians have been used to where they live. They lived in the same place. So they know about this how to deal with the summer a lot better than Americans do. That makes some sense what Jing's saying. So it's like maybe it will be past December when the ground invasion comes. That's certain. It's a claim. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's totally wrong, but it seemed to me to be an intelligent claim. Um, Supposedly, the maximum of human intelligence is given by saying, according to physicists who deal with this Schrodinger's equation, basically, because it's basically a Bayesian inference problem, by saying it's better to switch your bet in the Monty Hall problem. Okay. They say it's better, even though it seems like 50-50 on the surface, because it's an information carryover problem. It's better to switch. And they claim forever and ever this will be empirically true. So the empirical and the non-empirical in Schrodinger's equations, because of the update issue, sort of come into a different understanding than they ever were in classical antiquity. I think there's a lot of questions here, which, although we were told that there could be nobody alive today that could have this multifaceted and this comprehensive of an understanding of things, and they were told certain things like, the last man to have a comprehensive understanding of the Western account of things prior to specialization taking over was so-and-so, Montesquieu, whoever. Maybe not Montesquieu, maybe he only knew about legal and theological issues in the classical tradition to some extent. Maybe it was, maybe in Francis Bacon's time, man could still know this, who knows? We're given different names. But I think actually it's a question of what the standard is, because in a certain way one can say that today, if you're abundantly familiar with all these discussions in the sciences, in physics, and then you have at least some superficial understanding of the basics of calculus and topology and some other maths. And if you're in other, and if you do sort of think about economics and at least something about how micro and macroeconomics came about and what they cover and why the post-Keynesians had to propose them, and certain things, and then you're like, oh, this is the school that's now in power, and this is the school that's now in power in physics, and this is the school that's now in power here, and this is Heidegger, and et cetera, there's a certain number of things that if you know them, you're sort of in command of the Western account of things, or at least you have some, you're informed more or less about them, and you understand who the guys that really are the best at each of them are, and then you could sort of become the students of them, because there's a series of stupid people, a series of people that are kind of good, millions of people that get published in these various hundreds of thousands of peer-reviewed journals, and then you get a few people that are considered to be better, and then you get the people that are considered to be the best, and then you can kind of apprentice yourself to them, and then you could kind of become more or less conversant in everything. So it's actually still possible. So taken that way, I think when we think about what Vance is going to do, so Vance is aware, so that people say, oh, Vance is controlled by Peter Thiel, or Vance has read Leo Strauss or whatever. But that's good, because he's come into contact with people that are in some way aware of the leading things that are in power in every sense. Because not just he would say in an intellectual life, but it's been, how do you say, it's come into the. It's been established. It's been established. So it's like there's things that it's like they don't have to argue for themselves anymore because they're in established, and these are the people that are kind of like the masters of those subjects. So you could know about those things. And then if Vance has some knowledge of that and much better than Trump does, that's not bad. I don't think people shouldn't attack Vance on this account that he's sort of like in contact with these movements and knows something about what's actually in power on the earth. And so yeah, this is a long story, but at least we have some. Maybe it would make some of it perceptible.